All right, so am I just going to kick this off here? Or is there an official sort of welcome? Should I just go ahead and take
I'm
over? Or Liz, you have some opening?
Yeah, I was gonna introduce you.
Perfect.
Let's just wait till the stroke of 11 since that's what we
Okay.
promised. And yes, I second Jan's that we are so grateful to have you. So welcome back, everyone. And we are about to hear another really great presentation. Mary Ellen Daniels is a nationally board certified teacher. She has taught for over 27 years. She has also served as a teacher mentor, instructional specialist, and is most known for her work these days with Illinois Civics Hub. So you probably hopefully have seen her presentations or followed her on Facebook or other social media forums or seen her name attached to a lot of really wonderful initiatives. She also has served on the board of directors for the National Council of Social Studies and has been working on the recently released Educating for American Democracy roadmap, which hopefully I think we're going to hear a little bit about today also, right? So
Yep.
without further ado, Mary Ellen.
Great. Thank you so much, Liz, for that great introduction. As I was sharing briefly a little bit earlier, I love coming to this conference each year. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump from where I live in West Chicago to go to Naperville. And I was crestfallen when I heard about the date this year because my nephew is getting married in Alabama this weekend. And so I was so delighted when I heard that it was going to be virtual and I could come to you after I parked my parents at the pool. My job in this wedding is to get my parents, the grandparents of the groom, to the site. I have done my job. They're by the pool, and I'm here with you for today's workshop. Let me just say that all of the resources I'm sharing today in the slide deck will be shared with you at the end, and all of the resources I'm referring to are actually hyperlinked as well in the slide deck. So all the things will be yours, and most of this is also on illinoiscivics.org. So I want to start out by engaging your voice before we discuss current and controversial issue discussions by just asking you folks to use that smartphone that I know is sitting right next to you right now, or even to minimize your screen to go to the URL up at the top. And can you tell me what you think high quality current and controversial issue discussions look like, feel like, and sound like in the classroom? And think of bullet points, not sentences. So what are the key words, the key adjectives, verbs, nouns? If you have a term like critical thinking, go ahead and hyphenate it or use an underscore so that this word cloud generating app will keep the terms together. So we're just going to take a minute for you to share those via your smartphone or your computer. As people share, our word cloud will populate. Words that appear more frequently will be larger. This is called polleverywhere.com. The first few polls are free and they have all sorts of different polling elements there. You could use something like this with something that Amy shared previously with an image where they can click on different parts of an image to comment, or you can have open-ended responses and sentences or something like this. There's also free apps called Answer Garden and Mentimeter that also do this same thing, creating a word cloud for you. I like using this one because you can also use your smartphone with it, and that usually is kind of very user-friendly for adult participants. Just gonna have another 30 seconds or so. I think we have some trends really appearing here. You could see if you use something like this with some of those strategies that Amy shared with us previously, like see, think, wonder, how you could maybe really engage student voices in a synergistic way to share those ideas. So the big ideas that are coming across for me, of course, are safe, listening, and respectful. I see honesty and balance and openness that are important. They're honest, they're deep, they're evidence-based, but also they are uncomfortable. They should be safe, but you know, you don't build muscles by lifting feathers. You got to stretch a little bit. They're going to be uncomfortable. There's deliberation and participation. There's ground rules, perspectives. They can be global. Again, it can be emotional at times and cordial. Equity is at the center. Evidence-based. All of these things are great words we're going to build on in today's presentation. So let's keep those things in mind. Okay. So moving forward here. Keeping that word cloud in mind, I want you to use the chat box now to tell me what is your comfort level, maybe as a pre-service professor, maybe as a pre-service teacher, maybe you're already in the classroom or you support teachers in the classroom. What is your comfort level with facilitating current and controversial issue discussions in the classroom? And in the chat box, I want you to put the letter of the image that best represents how you feel about doing this work right now and why, just briefly why. So if you pick image A, put an A down and a sentence Y. If you pick D, put D down and a sentence Y, all in that chat box. And let's just take the temperature of where we're at. No letter is right or wrong. It's where you're at right now. All right, so I asked Liz actually to be my partner in this today. Liz, what are you seeing in the chat box? Can you kind of summarize what letters seem to be resonating and why?
Sure. I'm seeing a lot of Ds, which is great. It looks like people are on the journey and committed to moving forward. I am seeing some Bs. Again, another wonderful thing. They're there, ready to do it. I saw a C that talked about the idea that right now the climate with the pushback from schools, et cetera, makes it difficult. And we do have quite a few A's too, people with maybe lack of experience who want to do it, but they feel that they're not quite ready to start.
All right, we're going to speak to all 4 of those letters and all of those ideas you just shared, Liz, in the presentation today, and even give you some tools that you can take with to address each of those sort of perspectives, those honest perspectives you bring to this work. And we're going to talk a little bit about actually this activity and how it fits in just a minute. So Liz, you kind of made mention of this, and so have people in the chat box. But you know, one of the reasons I think I was invited to speak about this is because of our current era, our current reality of political polarization, right? So again, it's no secret to any of us that really polarization in our society has increased over the last couple of decades. This is information from the Pew Research Center that shows sort of the distribution of left to right in our society over the years. So this is 1994. And then going forward to 2004, 2014, and then 2017. So what we're feeling is real here. I mean, evidence-based. And if you look among the political elite, our current makeup of the House of Representatives, we can also see this polarization. And this is a great book for any of the budding sociologists in the room here, The Big Sort by Bill Bishop, where he documents really how 40 years ago, local political heterogeneity really reigned in our society. But now we are fairly evenly divided in the aggregate, but we tend to sort of self-segregate by zip code. We're more homogenous by zip code. And we can even see these pockets of dark in Illinois. And then we got the areas of gray and white. And this is even more evidence if we look at the presidential election results. Biden won Illinois by 57%. We are a blue state, but if you look at the distribution of votes by county, Trump won 88 of 102 counties in the state of Illinois in the last election. So there is a lot of ideological diversity in our own state. And really, we're kind of taught not to talk politics in polite company. And to the degree that which we do, it's with our ideological soulmates. And this has really only been amplified in this current media climate where we can curate our news and information and even our discussion circles leveraging technology. We can confirm our own biases by what channels we choose to watch, what websites we tend to follow. I think if I took a poll right now, there are probably some people that have disengaged with people on social media because of some of the political dialogue that's been happening in the past several years. The good news is, and I'm only talking good news from here on out, is that research shows that political polarization is not inevitable. And really, what we do in our classrooms really provides an opportunity for a better future. And this is a report from our friends from Circle out of Tufts University, all together now, that really talks about teaching a new generation to do the things in that word cloud, be civil, responsible, constructive citizens, look at their own implicit biases, be willing to get uncomfortable, but still in a safe environment, can really be a part of the solution to our polarized and dysfunctional politics. And a really great book by Diana Hess and Paula McAvoy, friends and mentors of mine, The Political Classroom, really makes the case that what we do in our classrooms, and that's not just the social studies classroom, but the math classroom, the PE classroom, the science, the arts, they are critical venues for us to build really understanding and empathy across differences. And we are all civics teachers. We all send messages to our students about power, representation, justice, identity by the norms we employ, the way we engage their voice, even by the narratives we choose to tell in our curriculum. We all are civics teachers. So I want you to look at this presentation by this lens. This isn't a social studies thing. This is an everybody thing. This isn't just a high school thing. This is a K through 20 thing. We all have to be really mindful of this. And we all have a role in really addressing this essential question of practice. How should we live together? So what I'm going to do in the presentation today is share with you some really ready to go tools and ideas about how we can do this in our classroom. And for those of you that are thinking about how you're going to start off the school year when we return to school, that how can we welcome all students and send that message that tells students that they are valued? We value humanity. This is not a both sides thing. This isn't a red or blue thing. This is a red, white, and blue or everybody thing that we all have to do. And Ava, absolutely. Education is political. It's about power. Doesn't have to be partisan. Political and partisan are two different things. So I'm going to unpack really 5 moves we can make to really support civil dialogue and this important work in the classroom, K through 20. And the first was really brought out in your word cloud, and that is to create the climate for these discussions. Great discussions don't just happen, much like a great lesson plan. They take time and intention. And so the first thing I would really encourage you to do, especially as we start back to school, Barbara says she's going to be teaching those students in July, is to really engage students to reflect on the past to inform the present. we really want to take time to have classrooms reflect on their experiences and have students have a voice recalibrating classroom practices to create that word cloud, that ecosystem for success. And then re-engage throughout the year for a collective renewal of goals. Our students come to us with all sorts of lived experiences with controversy and controversial issues. For some of them at home, it may not be safe to talk about these issues. They may have had a bad experience in a prior classroom with another teacher about these things. Really, it's incumbent upon us to tap into those lived experiences, become aware of them, and then be proactive in addressing them to help students and us as facilitators create routines for success moving forward. So, how can we do that? Well, this is a really simple and easy prompt that Paula McAvoy, one of my friends who wrote The Political Classroom, loves. But it's also a really powerful, quick, and easy bell ringer or exit slip that you could use with participants. You could ask students before discussing a topic, when I think about discussing, let's say, gun violence, I feel this because this. And just having the students share their response to that to you privately. That helps you unpack all sorts of things. It could give you really important information about prior trauma. It could give you really great information about maybe misinformation students are carrying into the classroom. If they feel something as a result of misinformation, you know that you have to curate some good quality information to counter those narratives. You could look at the range of emotions there are about a particular topic. Just really quick and easy, powerful tool to really engage. Imagine students coming back to school with all sorts of feelings this fall. You could use this as, when I think about returning to school in the fall, I feel this because this. What if administrators did this with teachers to see what we were thinking about as we were returning to school in the fall? How might that inform their decisions? Likewise, how might this inform our decisions welcoming our students back? You could even ask students something like this. Again, what is your comfort level with current and controversial issue discussions? We're going to talk about some hard things in this class. How do you feel about that? Have students answer which image and why. That why is the secret sauce of making this work, because how they interpret the pictures is really important. I did this with a group of teachers a few years ago on the North Shore. And one teacher, I actually had to walk to four corners of the classroom based on what image they picked and explain why they picked what they did with their colleagues. And one teacher came back to me and said, I don't belong in corner B, and that's what I picked. And I'm like, well, why do you think that way? And she said, well, I picked B because I was celebrating, like, yeah, I feel great about it. But this teacher said, I picked B because I saw that image as, no, I don't want to do this. So again, really helping students unpack why they pick the image really can give you some important information. For younger kids, you could use emojis. You can vary what these images are. The blob tree is one of my favorites as well. Hey, we're going to discuss this topic. How are you feeling about discussing this topic? Where are you on the tree and why? Having them explain that. This is a great SEL tool as well. It could be about a project you're doing, or you're checking in with them about some sort of inquiry-based lesson. So again, we're having them reflect, tap in, so that informs our practice. Visible thinking by Project Zero. Amy shared a bunch of these with you previously, but here are a few more that really tap into checking in with students. Compass point reflection. Students share something that's worrisome to them, exciting, something they need to know, and a suggestion moving forward. Color symbol image. Okay, when you think about this topic, what color comes to mind and why? What symbol, what image? 3-2-1 bridge. 3 ideas they have about that topic, 2 questions they have, and 1 idea they have for improvement. And again, claim support question. All of these are hyperlinked in the slide deck. The great thing with The visible thinking routines, as I shared in the chat box previously, is all of these are also available in Spanish. If you speak, if you have native speakers you can use them with that. And I shared in the chat box previously and on our Illinois Civics Hub website, there's a great professor, Dr. Catlin Trucker, who has actually made slides of all of these routines that are really ready to go for classroom use. Now, we're not doing this to simply take the temperature of the room. We want to go beyond helping students be thermometers and taking temperatures to becoming thermostats that can change the temperature of the room. We're not doing this to kind of have a complaint session here. We're doing this to be proactive. How can we do better? How shall we live together moving forward? So I encourage you to collect all the responses and maybe display them in a chart or a word cloud. And then as a class, discuss them and have that proactive conversation about what can be done to address past issues and create new routines. And that gets to the next point, creating those new routines. Engage students and their voice in creating norms around how we should live together. Yes, you might have classroom rules. Your school and institution might have rules, but your students can further define those rules, clarify and add to those baseline rules by helping create norms. Again, a really simple and easy tool. I often start my classes with the semester with my students by asking them, reflect on a class where you really felt safe and comfortable and you learned a lot. What did it look like? What did it feel like? What did it sound like? And I collect those responses, maybe on a Google Doc, a Padlet, a whiteboard, maybe a physical piece of paper. They could use words, images, and emojis. And then we kind of reflect on that. And maybe we even put a word cloud up. Hey, what do you think as students engaging in a productive social issue discussion looks like, feels like, and sounds like? Collecting those ideas. And then you can use those ideas to have the students reach consensus on norms, like my colleague Teresa Kruger from Belvedere did right here. Guidelines to follow a productive discussion. Her students identified basically 5 benchmarks that they were going to follow for a productive discussion. And when students create and sign off, they have ownership of this. They see themselves in these norms. They've learned about their fellow peers' prior experiences and know why these norms are important. And then Teresa, after her first couple of discussions, has her students revisit these norms. What could we revise? What do we need to change? Are these the same for online discussions as they are for in-person? How might they change? So again, these are some really great front-loading ideas that you can build on. And if you go to illinoiscivics.org, we have a whole toolkit around creating safe and reflective classrooms that share these protocols and more. I'm sorry, it looks like my video kind of kicked out there for a minute. All right. So let's move on here and talk about another move that we can make here. Clarify understanding of open versus settled issues. Pre-service folks, this is where you see some of the career-ending articles in the newspaper here. It's because people really haven't thought about open versus settled issues for discussions. So what is the difference? Well, looking at the work of Hess, McAvoy, and even like Wayne Journal out of the University of North Carolina, open issues, the types of issues we should be having deliberations about, are matters of live controversy with multiple competing views, and experts disagree on what the conclusion might be. Now, a settled issue, on the other hand, there's a broad-based agreement on what a particular decision should be, and there's evidence to support that answer, and the issue is non-controversial. So, for example, should the voting age be lowered to 16? That's open. Should women be allowed to vote? That's settled. To what extent should executive orders be used to create public policy? That's open. Should the federal income tax be replaced by a consumption tax? Open. In our system of federalism, who's best situated for mitigating environmental challenges? That's open. On the other hand, settled issues. Japanese internment, was it justified? No, that's settled. We should not be deliberating that in our classroom. Did the Holocaust occur? That's settled. No, we're not discussing that. Is there concern over climate issues? No, that's settled by science. We're not discussing that. What is open is policy around those issues. So there's a difference between open and settled. Not every issue is both sides. If issues really question the humanity of my students, that is not an issue we're going to debate or deliberate in my classroom. And there's a great blog by one of my colleagues, Bonnie Laughlin Schultz, who is a history professor down at Eastern Illinois University, that I've hyperlinked in this presentation about how we really need to rethink the both sides reflex. Not every issue is both sides. There are issues that demand us to go beyond being neutral and take a stand. Again, especially when we are making a safe environment that embraces the humanity of all of our children that we reach in our classroom. I'm not going to sit back when the humanity of my students are being challenged because of another different perspective. I'm going to stand up. I'm going to be an upstander in those situations. I'm going to stand for justice, equity. I'm going to stand for those things. Okay, now before we go to the third move, we're going to play a little game here because you guys have been quiet for a while. We're going to use your chat box again, and I'm going to get Liz to help me once again. This is a little activity that if you've been with me before, maybe you've experienced. It's called two-box induction. It comes from Spencer Kagan Cooperative Learning. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort a number of statements into either category A or B. And it's your job to figure out what is the pattern. Why are some things in A and other things in B? All right, so let's get started here. A is collaborative. It enlarges one's point of view and it searches for agreement. B is oppositional. It reaffirms one's point of view and it searches for differences. I want you to pause right here. When I do this with my students, I will take a pause right here and I will ask them to make hypotheses, make an inference. What do they think is the pattern? Why are those three elements in A and those other things in B? So go ahead in the chat box and write what are your ideas right now? A equals, B equals, what do you think is the difference? And Liz, when you start seeing some patterns here, feel free to give voice to them.
I'm seeing A labeled as things like Socratic seminar, discussion, arguing and debating in good faith versus B, which would be bad faith. A, helpful for discussion, B, not helpful for discussion. A, curious/learning stance. We have deliberation versus argument, open-minded versus closed-minded, collaboration versus competition, confrontation or conversational versus confrontational. So some really great thoughts here in the chat.
Yeah, and this is a really great strategy to put in your toolkit. Actually, Amy and Barbara, I told them I was going to build on their presentation. I often do this with like primary versus secondary sources. And I'll actually use artifacts and say, this is an A, this is a B, this is an A, this is a B. And they try to figure out the pattern and they create a definition of primary versus secondary sources by doing that. Or you could do something like fact versus opinion. You could do, if you're teaching Julius Caesar, Epicurean versus Stoic. If you're a Spanish teacher, when do you use ser? When do you use a star? It's just a way to build definitions, build schema for students without just kind of like, here are the definitions. All right, so the next phase is we're going to test your hypotheses now. So I'm going to give you a few more, and we're going to see if you're picking up what I'm laying down. So the next one, A, calls for a temporary suspending of one's own beliefs. B, invest wholeheartedly in your own beliefs. B, listen to respond. A, listen to understand. A, open-ended. B, conclusive. Okay, with that, we're just going to briefly revisit the chat box and see if you can add another descriptor to what the pattern is. If something has just like changed your pattern, you can put a new pattern, or try to use different adjectives to describe what's happening here. And let's see if we have a couple of new ideas here, Liz, before we move on.
Tony says neutrality versus polarization.
Interesting. You can see how it makes kids curious. It's like a puzzle in their mind. They're trying to figure it out.
And Ava says receptive versus closed.
Okay, let's go for one more. I feel like they have it in them.
Okay, we're getting a couple coming in right now. Quite a few. So, here's one from Robin. How about productive/growth versus self-affirmation?
Okay. All right. Now, in the third round, what we're going to do is a little bit different. I'm going to give you an attribute, and then you're going to use your spidey senses to tell me if it's an A or a B. And you're just going to put A or B in the chat box, and Liz will quickly tell me like what people are feeling here. All right. So causes introspection on one's own implicit biases. Does that sound like an A or a B sort of item?
The A's are coming in fast and furious.
They're right. No moss grows under your trees. All right, let's see. Assumes that many people have pieces of the answer and together a workable solution can be found. Does it sound A or B?
Again, I think we have unanimous A on this one.
All right. Okay. Causes a critique of other positions.
We have the majority B, but we do have some A's on this one.
All right, I see that more of an A. So when we get to the end, we'll see if you're buying what I'm selling here. Winning's the goal. Does that sound like an A or a B?
Looks like it's 100% B on that.
Yep. You submit your best thinking and defend it against challenges.
Looks like another majority B, but there are some A's.
Yep. It is B-ish. All right. Tries to understand and empathize with the lived experiences of others. A or B?
That looks like all A's.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so the last part of this activity is I will ask my students, what do you think we should title these columns? Instead of calling them A, B, what should we title them? So go ahead and go back. If there's a previous response of yours or somebody else that you'd like to submit as titling these columns, you can do that. Or if you have something totally new, let's see what you think we should title these. And then I will tell you what I have titled them. The suspense builds. And Liz, when you feel like you have some good titles to share, we'll share those.
Yeah, it looks like we have some that are discerning between a discussion or a Socratic seminar versus a debate or an argument. But then we also have some interesting answers where they've looked more with political terms, democratic versus authoritarian, or Dem slash Republican. Then we also have some character traits almost, compassionate versus combative, solution finding versus status quo.
All right. Well, for the sake of time, I'm just going to sort of talk about that these are all ways that we can engage student voice in our classroom, but A really gives the attributes of dialogue when we facilitate dialogue in our classroom, and B are the attributes of debate in our classroom. And actually hyperlinked to this PowerPoint deck that I'm going to share with you in the notes section is a handout from the U.S. Institute of Peace where I actually curated these attributes from that you could give to your students, whether they're in the classroom or they're your pre-service teachers. What's the difference between dialogue and debate? And what are you facilitating in your classroom? I think the apprehension people feel that were illustrated in those images at the beginning, A and, point, I think C it was, the apprehension teachers are feeling right now is because often people think about if we're going to discuss these things, it has to be a debate. Because quite frankly, that's kind of what what's being modeled in popular media right now, right? But there is another pathway. We don't have to set this up as a win-lose conversation. We can set this up as a dialogue sort of a situation here. And I'm going to share with you some specific protocols that can help you choose dialogue over debate. What are some of the strategies that I can use in my classroom to make this happen? Now, let me just make the point again for dialogue. And I know Amy and Barbara talked a lot about lived experiences in their last presentation. And there's actually a report that's hyperlinked by Joe Kahn, Jessica Marshall, and why am I blanking on the last name there from Castle? That basically talks about we need to go there. Kathy Cohen, that's what I'm talking. Let's go there, making a case for race, ethnicity, and a lived civics approach for civic education. And that civic education is broad. We're all civics teachers, remember? So how is it that we embrace these diverse experiences? Because dialogue can be used to build consensus, to clarify understanding, promote exploration of complex issues, and even build empathy for the lived experiences of others. So what strategy does which sort of learning objective? Well, the first one I want to talk about is actually something like this. And we're going to use that chat box one more time because I want to keep Liz on her toes here. I want to ask you a question, and I do a whole workshop on this question. Should teachers disclose their political beliefs on issues being discussed in the classroom? In the chat box, what do you think? Are you a strong yes? Are you an agree, a not sure, a disagree, or a HE double hockey sticks no? What's the temperature of the room, Liz?
the temperature of the room is the thermostat is broken because
It's all over.
it is all over. A lot of people, though, are being very specific about saying it's contextual.
Yeah, it is contextual. And
Yeah.
actually, the research shows it's contextual. I actually did a 1-hour workshop for the Illinois Learning Technology Center on this very topic. We did what's called a structured academic controversy on this, where we looked at the data to make an informed choice. But what kind of discussion strategy I set you up for this is an activity called Human Barometer. I'm very weather themed: climate, thermometers, thermostats. It must be the humidity in Alabama that is with me here. But this is a strategy called Human Barometer, and this is what I've set up here. So how does Human Barometer work? Well, what you do in Human Barometer is you give students individual think time to respond to a prompt. And then students will take a stand. We're not going to have time to do that today because I'm showing you different discussion strategies. But if I was illustrating this, I might have you physically move to a different area of the classroom if we were together to show where you stand on that question of teacher disclosure. Or I might use something like Padlet to do it virtually, or the chat box. Or you could use Post-it notes to show where students are at. And then what you do is you have students share their perspectives, why they are where they are, and acknowledge the comments of others. For example, that Post-it note, that Padlet note, or even physically where they are in the room based on where they've decided to change, how they've decided to change. And the goal of this is to listen to understand. It's not a debate, but a discussion where people summarize the point of view of people that spoke previous to them. And when they speak, they're addressing ideas, not the people stating them, using academic language. And again, if someone says something you agree with, your position changes, you change positions. And I have to say, as you use this more and more with students, they get more and more comfortable with that changing of positions. And this works best when there's clear choices. Should we raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour? Yes, no. Should we lower the voting age to 16? Yes, no. Should teachers disclose? Yes, no. And then students base their evidence on logos, maybe data, but also if they have a personal connection, they could use some of that, ethos. Students do not have to have a personal connection to the issue, as students may confuse the attempts of their peers to persuade them as attacks of lived experience. And you don't want to use this necessarily when the topic is emotionally charged for participants. I wouldn't do a Human Barometer with, let's say, removing Confederate monuments, because people might be very close to that emotionally, and to hear others take a perspective on that emotionally charged issue might be really traumatic for them. So again, it really works best when there's clear choices and you can really use evidence or logos to back up the claims, and there's not necessarily that real personal connection to the issue. Now, one of my favorite, and also one of my favorites with Diana and Paula, is something called a structured academic controversy, otherwise known as the SAC. It's kind of an unfortunate nickname. But basically, in a structured academic controversy, the teacher assigns a topic with two opposing viewpoints. Students pair off and research or write up each the side that they are assigned. When they're assigned that perspective, I'm not telling students they have to take that perspective on, but what are the best claims of that assigned perspective? Then students present their assigned perspective to one another. The listeners silently take notes. And then with the notes as a guide, the pairs switch roles and present the other viewpoint. At the end of that process, the pairs drop their assigned positions, and then we're not going to debate, but where could we find consensus? Now that we understand these two perspectives, where can we find consensus on this issue? Now, again, this works best when there's two clear perspectives, but room for compromise. And when building consensus, students can use text-based evidence and even their own lived experiences. Neither of the assigned perspectives would be morally objectionable. And again, this should not be used to deliberate settled issues. I'm not going to do an SAC on slavery, good or bad. Japanese internment, good or bad. Plessy versus Ferguson, good or bad. No. And if you like, in the slide deck, this is a hyperlinked video that's 9 minutes that shows you what an SAC looks like in action when students do it. Now, one last thing that you might use is sort of a silent Socratic seminar. I saw that many of you like the Socratic seminar, so you might really like this. This is big paper talk. You could even pair this with the Socratic seminar. It works really good. And in big paper talk, students in small groups are given a text, a prompt. Maybe it's one of those primary sources that Amy and Barbara shared with you, or an image as a stimulus. And the students silently reflect on that image and simultaneously write or provide questions, comments, and observations about that prompt. They could use Post-it notes. They could use a different color text on a digital document. And then once they leave their initial reply, they silently respond to others in that small group they're working with. Then students comment on other people's big paper. And then they return to their original paper and the silence is broken and we can debrief as a large group. And there are variations of this. It's often called a gallery walk, small paper talk. Instead of walking around on a big piece of paper, you could circulate a small piece of paper in a small group or even do this online. So if you were doing basically just a term or a word, it might look something like this. If you were having kids maybe process some big essential questions you're tackling in the curriculum, it could look something like this. Or that prompt could be part of a speech. Imagine you have different parts of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech on different posters in the room. And the students had that conversation based on those different prompts. And then you come back together and have your Socratic seminar. Again, this works best when there's a wide array of perspectives and students can discuss the question and the prompt to clarify their understanding. And I also find that this really works well when an issue could be a little bit more emotionally charged because, again, there's that thoughtful silence before sharing. And let me just say this, these are all protocols for current and controversial issue discussions that you're preparing for. When current events occur, like let's say January 6th, that's not the time to have a policy debate. That's the time to be there, listen, and be present for students because current events are unfolding and our information can change. So when current events take center stage, this is not the time to be deliberating. This is the time to help kids process. And actually in this slide deck, I have hyperlinked as a note on this particular slide how you can help students do that really well. And then finally, last couple of really quick points, crafting your prompt. This is a fast one. The questions you ask for these conversations matter. If you're doing something like Human Barometer, you might ask a question like, should the federal minimum wage be raised to $15 an hour? Those are binary choices. Make your move. But if I wanted to discuss the minimum wage or the living wage with a structured academic controversy, my prompt might be, to what extent should the federal minimum wage be changed? We could look at yes, no, and then try to build consensus somewhere in the middle. But if I wanted to do something like a Socratic seminar or big paper talk, the prompt might be something more open, like what responsibility does the federal government have to guarantee a living wage? See how that's more open for that dialogue and questioning? So depending on what strategy and what your learning objective is, really think about how you ask that question. And I would also say no matter what strategy you use, I would practice with sort of a non-controversial or a non-emotional prompt. So you might start practicing something like an SAC on a topic like this, something fun where they could kind of practice the protocols before they get into the controversy. All right, in the chat box, because I know we have just a couple of minutes left, I want you to finish the underlined bright blue portion of the sentence there. When I think about supporting civil dialogue in the classrooms, I used to think, but now I think. And let's just take the temperature, Liz, here as we wrap up. What are we thinking here?
Angela says that she used to think of debate, but now she thinks of conversation. From Jennifer, she used to think debate was inevitable, but now she realizes that thoughtful prompts can stimulate dialogue.
I'll take that.
Yeah, I used to think it would be very uncomfortable, but now I think it can be safely structured. From Ava.
Let's hear one more
Cool.
just because of time.
Sure.
Yeah.
We have CRNet. I used to think I should allow students to speak and react unmoderated, but now I think that structure is important for them to provide the opportunity to be heard.
Yeah. That just kind of brings up this little tool here that we did, just basically illustrates that you want to really use a formative assessment task to help students reflect and set new goals after a conversation. So imagine you had a discussion about the minimum wage, and then at the end ask students, I used to think this about the minimum wage, but now I think. And what did they learn? How did they move? How did they grow? It may not be that they changed their minds, but maybe they have more evidence or they have more understanding of the other perspective. And again, going back to Amy and Barbara's favorite tool, visible thinking, these same visible thinking tools that you can use at the beginning of a discussion, you could use at the end to reflect. And again, we have a whole lot more at illinoiscivics.org, along with a whole toolkit around current and societal issue discussions. Now, we're going to do a whole bunch of free PD this summer around things like current and controversial issue discussions and even visible thinking. You can find these on our Illinois Civics Hub website. And there is a new roadmap for teaching social studies K through 12 called the Educating for American Democracy roadmap. And we're going to be doing explicit webinars on the thematic questions in this roadmap. So like, how can we ensure that our sources of information about contemporary debates and possibilities are accurate and fair? You can sign up and join us live at 9:30 in the morning, or if you register and you want to watch it later poolside at your convenience, we will send you a recording. So again, all of these are on illinoiscivics.org. We also have a micro-credential course that goes more deeply into things like current and societal issue discussions. And I think Liz participated in, correct?
I
You can
did.
ask her
I have
later if
my
she
bronze badge.
recommends. Yep. And then COVID happened.
Yeah, still working on the silver badge, but I've got my bronze one. It's wonderful. I do highly recommend it.
We've been actually doing cohorts with pre-service teachers at EIU. So if any of you pre-service folks would be interested in offering this to your pre-service teachers, reach out to me and let me know. We can make that happen. We might actually be getting money from some people that have lots of money to help do that. So come and talk to me about that. And you can go to guardiansofdemocracyteachers.org to find out more information. You can find me on Facebook, Illinois Civics Hub. You can follow me on Twitter at Illinois Civics Hub. And with that, I don't know, I mean, I'll stay behind if there's lingering questions. But again, all of my information you can find on that Illinois Civics Hub. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to put a link to this slide deck in the chat. Whoops, that's not the link to the slide deck. I'm going to put the link to the slide deck in the chat. And that finishes up my comments for today. So I hope you walked away with at least one or two ideas to enhance your practice.
Thank you so much, Mary Ellen. This was phenomenal. Every time I'm in a room with you or even virtually, I learn so much for my own practice. I am going to put the link to our session evaluation in the chat box. So please remember to do that evaluation and you'll get a confirmation that will give you a second link, which will be for your certificate of completion if you need that for your Illinois continuing education credits. And we do need to do a book drawing. So Mary Ellen, I was thinking about West Chicago because you taught there for quite a while. So I'll tell you what, my friends, I'm going to have everybody right now, please type in what you think the West Chicago mascot is. And then on the count of 3, we'll hit submit. And the first right answer will win a copy of the Black Lives Matter in School book. So the West Chicago mascot, no peeking. 1, 2, 3, submit. Oh, Angela is right there on the ball. Okay, Angela Rowley is our winner for the book this session. So thank you everyone for this. We're going to take a brief break and then you'll be coming back to hear our keynote, who is going to start at, what time are we starting that at?
12:20.
12:20.
12:20. Thanks so much, Mary Ellen, and congratulations, Angela. We'll see all of you back after a little lunch break at 12:20 to meet and engage with our keynote speaker, Dr. Denisha Jones. Have a wonderful lunch, everyone.